Welcome, everyone. We have one more email that goes out exactly at 4 o'clock, so we're just going to give it a couple more minutes for others to join us, and then we'll be getting started. And the link is in the chat. And while we're waiting to start, just to let you know, we will be recording this. We always put our recordings on our EdTech calendar, which I'll show you in a few moments. So if you don't want to be on a recording, feel free to turn off your camera. That's absolutely fine. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to be talking about unlocking accessibility with universal design for learning. I'm Carrie Lane, and I'm here today with my EdTech team. I'm a project specialist on the EdTech team, and my director, Alicia Gallegos Butters, is going to be helping out with the chat if you have any questions. And a little bit about me, my background is in teaching English and middle school English and also third grade, but I have a real interest and passion for accessible teaching and learning and went back to school to get my assistive technology certification. So I really like to talk about ways that we can bring assistive technology and the principles of accessibility into everyday classes. All right, so something new this year. I know I see some familiar faces of people who've joined us in the past for accessibility sessions. This year, we're offering professional learning credits through USD. If you're interested in attending our sessions and then writing a reflection to get credit, what you can do is I'm going to share a link in the chat. It's our sign up for today or our sign in for today. Once you sign in today and stay for the whole session, you'll have an opportunity to then complete a reflection and submit that back so that you can start earning credits for attending our multitude of sessions this year. So here's the link for that sign in if you're interested. And Alicia, can you remind me how many of the sessions do they need to attend for one credit?
It is for one credit, 13 sessions for one credit.
Perfect. So you are 1/13 of the way after attending today. And also, I wanted to bring up our Experience, Create, Facilitate, which is something else that we're offering this year. It's a new and innovative experience. If you're interested in accessibility and how you can bring concepts of accessibility into your classroom with 3D printing, we have an experience that's 2 days. In the first day, you'll be coming to where we work, which is the Linda Vista Innovation Center, and we will have an opportunity for you to work with some of our students that are coming in to explore 3D printing and accessibility rotations. And then that second day will be one-on-one coaching and group coaching to learn how to emulate and utilize the ideas of 3D printing and rotation-based accessible teaching in your own classroom. So if you're interested in that, the link is in the PowerPoint as well. And just one more time, I will share the bit.ly link for everyone who's joined today, so you can access any of the resources that I'm sharing now. All right, let me just take a moment and ask anyone who can to put in the chat just what brings you here today? What grade level do you teach, and what are you hoping to learn today about UDL and accessibility? All right, we have an innovation coordinator and looking at UDL work as it connects with perfect. Looking for information for littles, ELA, great. UDL in virtual programs, ELA again. All right. Well, thank you for sharing, and we will definitely touch on some tools and some strategies that you can use in different contexts, but also feel free to unmute throughout the training or type into the chat if there's something specific that you're thinking about in your context that you want me to talk about. We'll also have an activity a little later on where you'll be able to look at these principles and how to apply them in your own contexts. So we can definitely look at those in a more specialized and specific way as well. So high school tech coach and science and math for linking between IEPs and UDL. Oh, great. That's an excellent thing to talk about as well. All right. So today's learning outcomes, the first thing we're going to do, because this is our first accessibility session of the year, I always like to touch on the why. And you're all here, so I think you probably know a lot of the why, but accessibility is so important for our students, and it has a huge impact on how they learn. So we're going to go over that, and then we will dive into universal design for learning and thinking about how to create inclusive classrooms. And we will also dive into the UDL 3.0 guidelines, which are a newer version of the UDL guidelines, not so new anymore, but they came out in July of 2024. And with that, we're going to look at some strategies as well as some tech tools, and then we will leave with just a little bit of hands-on exploration of some of the tools that you might want to use. All right. So childhood disability is when students or children have a physical, mental, or emotional condition that creates a limitation to a certain activity or a task. And when we think about our learners, I'm sure that we have someone that comes to mind that maybe has one or more of these things that we see in our classroom, and it makes it difficult for them to complete the tasks in our room or to stay on task in our classroom. And so that is what childhood disability is. And just a couple of statistics from 2022 and 2023, 15% of public school students received special education or related services, and 32% of those services were for specific learning disabilities. Now, in the chat, I didn't see anyone say that they were a special education teacher, but if you wouldn't mind putting a Y in the chat if you are a special education teacher, and I'll just give it a minute. Now, I didn't see any Ys in the chat, so my next question is, how many of you have a student that has a specific learning disability in your classroom? Put a Y if you have one. And so this is really what UDL is for. Special education teachers will have students that have all different types of needs and special services that they might have specific accommodations for. But in our classrooms, and so many of you said yes, UDL is the way that we can really go about making sure that we're meeting all our learners' needs when we do have students who are in our classroom who have specific learning needs or learning disabilities, even if we're not a special education teacher. And I always like to show this video. It's students speaking about their experiences with different learning disabilities.
My name is Jade. I'm in the 8th grade, and reading is a huge struggle for me. Teacher would ask me to read in front of the class aloud. I'd open my mouth, but no words would come out. Not because I couldn't speak, because I couldn't read the words on the page. They were jumping around, backwards, blurry, sideways. D was a B, W was an M. I just kept it all to myself. Like, no one can relate to me. This is just my problem and I have to deal with it. I have to find a way to deal with this. Oh my gosh. I can still remember the names. Idiot, dummy. Going through that takes a piece of you. After a while, you just like, you get this numb feeling, like it just doesn't bother you anymore. That's when you get really worried. That's when you should get really worried. When you get this numbing feeling, someone calls you and you're like, I don't care. They're right. That's the worst feeling in the world.
I'm Alex, and I'm in the 6th grade, and math is not easy for me. When I look at a math problem, all I see is confusion, and it's like, what are numbers? A lot of times I get the signs mixed up. I don't know what they're called. My brain is going here to there, to there, to there, to there, to there, and it's just so crazy that I just want to scream. My stomach starts to hurt. I start to think the worst things about me. It's so overwhelming and stressful that it's hard to even think.
And we also might have in our class students who have a physical or other disability.
My name is Phoebe. I'm 11 years old and I have got cerebral palsy. I am disabled and I cannot walk or talk. I use a special computer to help me talk. I use that by looking at my screen. What would you like to do at school? I like maths. What would you like to be when you're older? I would like to be on television. What's it like not to talk? It is normal. You might meet me or someone else with a physical disability. Don't treat us like a baby or ignore us. Talk to me.
My name is Dylan, and I am autistic. All my life I wanted so badly to connect with people. But they couldn't understand, because I had no way to communicate. So many people can't understand that I have a mind. All they see is a person who is not in control. But now you can hear me.
Hi, Dylan.
Hello, my name is Dylan Bartwash. We are the reality of our thinking life. And we're capable of so much if we just open our minds.
And I always like to show those videos because they explain a lot of the profiles, or they talk from the point of view of a lot of the profiles of people that we might have in our classrooms. And it does show a little bit about the technology that students can use to communicate, the assistive technology that they can use to look at an eye gaze device and communicate and speak to us, but it also shows us just the overwhelming feeling when the content or the way that we feel we are receiving information doesn't resonate with us. And so I think that that's really important. And going into that, there is a simulation that I would like you all to try. So this is a grid. It has numbers 1 through 100 in here. And what I want you to do is you need to find the numbers in order. So 1, 2, and then you're going to move on to 3, 4. If you can't find a number, you cannot skip it. So you have to keep looking until you find the next number in the sequence. And with that being said, I'm going to give you 1 minute to do it. So I'll stop talking and you can just kind of either make a mental note, or if you have it on your screen and you want to kind of like annotate your screen, you can do that too. But basically, you're just going to look for the numbers in order and you cannot skip a number. So ready, set, and go. All right. So with that being said, please stop looking for your numbers. Did anybody get further than 10? 10, perfect. Christine, oh, 13, 11, 13. Okay, now my people who, well, honestly, anyone, can you type in or unmute and tell me what was something that made that difficult? Hard to do after a day of Zooming, maybe because of the eye strain, the sizing of it. With the sizing, Jessica, is it the sizing that they're all different sizes or just the sizing on the screen that was difficult? The size, all different sizes, okay? Spacing of the numbers not in expected order. Yeah, so depending on how we deliver a message to students, if we have different fonts or we have things that are not in a logical order, there are a lot of things that could be not so difficult for students to do. They might know how to count up to 100, but when we display information like this, it makes it difficult. Now, this one does have a trick. So on this screen right here, you'll notice that the numbers are divided into quadrants. And so if you look, we have 1, then we have 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. And then it's going to keep going in this order, going clockwise all the way to 100. So what I'm going to do is play it for 1 more minute and see if now that you know that there's an order to what you're looking for, if you get more than you got before. So you can start from, if you were up to 13, start from 13 and see if you find a few more than you did before. All right, and I'll have you stop. Now in the chat, did anybody find that to be easier? You can just say yes, or you can say easier, a bit, a lot of yeses, way easier. So some strategies don't work for everyone, but at least most people, it seems like, found it to be a small bit easier. And that's what we're going for with UDL, is creating situations where most of our learners are able to be met with something that is easier to them because we've designed it thinking about them from the beginning. And we'll do one more. This one, I would love for it to get loud. If you want to unmute, you're welcome to. But what we're going to do is we are going to look at the screen and there's going to be a word. The word is not going to match the color. You need to say the color, not the word that you see. So it might make more sense when we start, but if not, then clearly the directions are not that good. I can also take a volunteer if no one wants to unmute. Anyone want to volunteer?
I'll do it.
Thank you. All right. So we'll start from here.
Green. Yellow.
So say the color, not the
Oh. Okay. Sorry. Bad eyes. Okay. Do again. Blue. Yellow. Pink. Red. Green. Pink. Blue. Green. Red. Yellow.
Thank you. So anyone who was following along, was that easy? No. And what makes it harder is that we can all read, right? So if we weren't able to read, everyone has different levels of reading comprehension. We have younger students who aren't able to read. In this case, if we didn't have one skill, this would be a much easier task. And so sometimes it's about the directions. Sometimes it's about thinking about our learners' level and what will make things easier for them. But a lot of times, directions or just something simple, like if we had taken away a letter and we had just written a different word besides a color word, it would have made it a much easier task. All right, so let me pause this and we'll go back to our slides. So feel free to unmute for this or just type in the chat, how did the videos we watched and the simulations make you feel about how accessibility in our classroom might influence our students? So how might accessibility influence our students thinking about these simulations and videos? Frustrated, yeah. Inept. Challenging for them and difficult for them to explain what they need, feeling dumb, yeah. Yeah, and so a lot of those words, the challenging, the idea of frustration, that's a lot of what our students are feeling, especially when we're in a classroom that isn't necessarily geared towards the students who are at either of the margins, whether that's, they have something that keeps them, on one side or they have something that keeps them on another side. We usually tend to teach to the middle. And because of that, a lot of our students end up feeling frustrated. And so as we're designing for our students, it's important to remember that by giving our students curriculum that's accessible, and Jennifer actually said this really well, we can increase engagement and we can also make our students more independent in their learning. We can make it so that things that they previously thought were impossible can now become possible. And I always like to mention, because this is a very UDL concept and the idea of curb cutting as well, that small changes that we make for students in our curriculum for disabilities and learning difficulties generally help all of our students. They really do translate through and provide additional supports and assistance for other students as well. And then it's really important in terms of your web content and things that you're putting out there to know that non-accessible or inaccessible materials can also create negative publicity and cause lawsuits. And so we're going to watch this quick video about bowling, but it really explains the idea of inclusive education.
I'm trying to answer in my research is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education. So how am I going to explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try and describe this, or we could have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball was the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins that are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are kids who need the most support and are kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve, And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach to the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to, the kids with autism, the kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with universal design for learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need.
All right, so really the takeaways from that video and just from thinking about designing for accessibility, the first things to think about as you're designing at that curve are removing barriers for students. So knowing who your learners are and thinking about the barriers that they might face, and then creating opportunities. Those might be alternative opportunities or additive opportunities that will allow those students to be able to meet the learning goal or the standard. And designing to the edges as you're starting to design your lesson. So one thing, and I believe it was Eric who mentioned this, but there's the idea of accommodations. And accommodations are great. We have students who have IEPs and they do need specific accommodations, and that's amazing. But when you think about accommodations, these are changes that are made to fit the needs of someone after the fact. They're retroactive, which means that they're going to have a more limited scope. There are going to be certain items that you need to change, and that's it. And also, if you have multiple students who need accommodations, this becomes time consuming. So if you're trying to accommodate your lesson to meet the needs of all your students who need specific accommodations, after the fact, it will take up a lot of time. However, if you start thinking about, and I will say technology and AI makes this a lot easier, if you start thinking about flexibly designing your content from the beginning, it's a proactive approach and it makes it a lot less time consuming. And it also supports multiple students, your students who need those accommodations, but also your students who don't. And how many of you are familiar with CAST and just the basics of universal design for learning? I'll take a thumbs up or a yes in the chat. Okay, got a no, few yeses. All right. Well, we will go in and just watch this. It's really the quick basics and it explains UDL very succinctly. So I think that it's important in a UDL session to just have this basis. A lot of people talk about UDL, but this really sums it up nicely.
This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal, and she's got a very diverse group of students. And so does this teacher. And this one. Most do. In fact, research shows that the way people learn is as unique as their fingerprints. What does this mean for teachers of today? Classrooms are highly diverse, and curriculum needs to be designed from the start to meet this diversity. Universal design for learning is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. Whoa, that's a fancy term. Universal design for learning. Let's unpack it a bit. Let's think about the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in a classroom brings her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think about the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have three broad networks. One for recognition, the what of learning, one for skills and strategies, the how of learning, and one for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all three. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and to accommodate all kinds of users, with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building works better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, what barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students reaching these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use the 3 UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so that students can acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interests and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they will persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. Get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum and keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways, allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they know in different ways, and offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all.
All right, so the video makes it sound really easy. It is not really easy, so that is a disclaimer, but it is really important. And so as the video said, we've got 3 different kind of tiers of things to think about in our creation of curriculum. How to engage our students to make it so that we're answering the why of why they should care about the learning. Then creating multiple ways for them to perceive and build on the information. And then activating different strategies for them to be able to express and communicate what they want. And so we can do this with our goals, our assessments, the methods we teach, and the materials we use. And there's a little acronym to help us do this. So it's STEPS, standards. Start with the CCSS standards. Let me see if I can erase this really quick. Let's see. Okay, so standards, we start with the CCSS, Common Core State Standards, or whatever standards you're using. So if you're a science teacher, it might be NGSS. If you are a computer teacher, it might be the Computer Science Standards. Whatever it is, you think about your standards and then the task, the activity that you want your students to do to meet that standard. Then this part is really important. What are the essential skills that are needed to do the task? And a lot of times as educators, we think about essential skills as just the ones that are our action verbs within our learning goal or our objective. So if we're thinking about being able to write a paragraph, we immediately think about the skill of being able to, synchronize our words to create a sentence or a paragraph, or to blend our writing and our action verbs and our subjects and objects together, but we don't think about the other things that are entailed in writing. Are we able to type if we're writing on the computer? Are we able to use handwriting skills if we're writing a paragraph pen and paper? So there are some essential skills that you don't necessarily think of from the beginning. And that's where we can then, if we start to think about all the skills that are involved, predict what barriers might come up for our students. And that might be different depending on who our learners are. So some of our students might struggle with certain things and have specific barriers. Others might struggle with other things. And because we are now thinking through our activities with this STEP lens, that's where we can start to create digital and non-digital supports that are embedded within the lesson. Does anyone have any questions about that? And I'll give an example in just a second. Okay, well, while I'm going over the example, please feel free to either ask a question in the chat or unmute if you do have a question. So here's an example of a writing focus. And you'll notice a lot of my examples involve writing because I was a middle school English teacher. And so a lot of the times when I'm thinking about tasks, they go back to my time teaching middle school English. So a standard that I thought of was write an informative or explanatory text that examines a topic and convey my ideas clearly. So the task that a teacher might have come up with is, after completing a graphic organizer, write a 1-paragraph summary of a social studies passage. And with this, we are already building in a support, the graphic organizer. But we have here our 1-paragraph summary of a social studies passage. So anyone feel free to unmute or type in the chat, what are going to be some of those essential skills that a kid needs to do this assignment? Know how to fill in a graphic organizer. Absolutely. So that is a skill of organization and understanding how to chunk information into the right sections.
And then how to use the organizer to transfer those information into a paragraph, like the structure clearly representing.
Absolutely. So learning how to take a graphic organizer and turn it into a paragraph. We have vocabulary. So if this History Alive social studies passage has vocabulary that is above a student's level, will they even be able to get the content onto the graphic organizer? And then I see writing or typing skills. So yes, these are all some of those essential skills. And wow, my text box went way too fast. I was hoping to drag it down for you. So we're going to go back this way. Okay, so my essential skills, we've got typing or handwriting. I put in there spelling and grammar, might be something, complete sentences from our outline, organizing ideas into the outline and then into logical sentence, and reading and decoding text. A lot of that also includes the comprehension with vocabulary word lists. So these were just some examples. Now, with that being said, if we're thinking about, no worries, thanks for joining us. If we're thinking about some barriers now, and these kind of build off of those essential skills, we have that they might not be able to type or handwrite. They might not have the reading comprehension to understand the passage. They might not have the vocabulary. I'm drawing a blank on the word. Speaking of vocabulary, the acquisition of vocabulary to know what the words mean. In addition to the fact that they might not feel comfortable writing a paragraph because writing is a struggle for them. So there are multiple barriers there. And so then our next thing is to think about supports. So in the chat or unmuting, what supports could we come up with to make sure that our students are able to complete this task? We already have a graphic organizer. What else can we do? A word wall. Yep. So including the vocabulary we know is going to be in the passage. I love that. Prompts within the organizer. So if you just give an organizer that is incredibly blank, it's just a category and a blank, is that going to be enough for our students? They might need extra. Sentence starters, modeled examples. Modeling is so important in writing, absolutely. So these are all great supports. And these are all supports that are non-digital supports, which is wonderful because we don't all have access to all sorts of technology. There are also some supports that we can use with assistive technology or just general technology you can find on most devices. So if our students have a hard time typing, there's speech to text and dictation. There's also voice memos they can write into. If our students have a hard time with spelling and grammar or just getting those sentences the way that we want them, maybe they can use predictive text, which a lot of programs have settings for. If students are having a hard time they're on the computer going between reading and writing up their paragraph, a split screen where they can see both things simultaneously, just like they could see it in pencil and paper, could be something they use. And as someone else said here, the idea of a chunked graphic organizer. So making it so that either you're filling it out part by part or making it so that there are more prompts and sentence starters within the graphic organizer to get them started. Break it down one step at a time. Absolutely. So I do have here, and I think because of time, I am going to only do 3 minutes for this activity, but here I'm going to share a link to this. It's the steps, assess choice or access choice and independence kind of graphic organizer for you, or just a form for you to fill out. So I want you to think about a standard that you would use in your own classroom. What's a task that you would use to teach that standard? And then take just a few moments to think about some barriers and supports that you could embed in. And so with this, you'll notice when you click into the link I'm going to share, it says use this template. You'll hit use this template and then you should be able to just type right into it and it's yours to keep. So I've made it so that everybody has their own kind of option. And this was something created by our North Coastal SELPA. So they are, they have great things and they talk about special education. And so this is one of the tools that they use, and you can feel free to use it as you're starting to think about your curriculum. So the link's there. I will stop talking and we'll do 3 minutes of this 5-minute timer. And please, if you have any questions, unmute or type them into the chat. And that's what happens when you have a groovy timer and it tells you you're done. So does anyone want to share a little bit about their experience with the template? And if not that, then did everybody find the template to be a little bit helpful when you're thinking about your standards and how to meet the needs of your learners? Something that was easy enough to try to apply? Or not? Simple? The template is good, just a good guide. Organization's clear. Excellent. So that is a good tool for you as you move forward on your UDL journey. Now, the next thing that I want to share with you. Perfect. So I like to do the barriers and supports one at a time, back and forth. Yeah. So however you use the template, it's really whatever works for you. So that is one resource that you can kind of take with you today. And I'm going to shrink this just because I am not seeing the whole thing on the screen. But these slides, they have a lot on them. Oh, thank you, Teresa. I like my groovy timer too. These slides have a lot on them, and I won't go into all of these today because this would take a lot longer than what we have. But what I did here was the next 3 slides talk about how to meet the different UDL guidelines. So engagement, representation, and action and expression. The top part will link to a really good resource kit that was also created by one of the SELPAs at SDCOE. And they worked on creating an entire toolkit or flip kit for each of these different areas. And so what you do is you select a UDL strand, and then you select a type of tool you might want to use, whether it's a digital tool or a teaching strategy. And then you select a guideline. So there are 9 different guidelines within the new UDL 3.0 guidelines. And so one of them is welcoming and interest, sustaining effort and persistence, and emotional capacity. You click on one, and then you'll find lots of different resources that can help you get started. And so I've included some of those on my slides today, but I've also included some that aren't on here, and there are plenty that they have that I didn't include. But you can do that for digital tools or for strategies. And then what you have here is also just some kind of things to think through as you're meeting these different guidelines. So for example, if you're talking about welcoming your students' identities and interests, what you can do is you can create get to know you activities. You can create choice boards or self-selected reading and writing. And so here you'll find links to things that help with getting kids started with story starters or UDL choice boards, which we will get into a little bit later because I think that's really important for you all to see. Or tools like Classroom Screen, where you can have monitors for the noise level or letting kids get up and move around. Here for persistence and effort, a lot of that has to do with creating models, like I heard in the chat, scaffolding and chunking assignments. And so there are some AI tools here that help you scaffold your assignments. There's also some suggestions for feedback and some tools that allow you, for example, to do a screencast where you can give your students feedback within that screencast as you're grading their papers or you're going over their assignments. And emotional capacity is making our students feel empowered to be able to do things. And so some of the things linked here are empathy maps to get to know our students, creating support goals for your students, or letting your students create their own support goals. So moving into representation, that same toolkit is linked here. And with representation, we are thinking about how to help our students perceive the information. And so these are going to be tools that help to make the volume louder if our students have a hard time hearing, or create captions and alternative text for the videos that we're sharing in class. Also, things that really help the kids see reflections of themselves in what they're reading. And so I will show you this one. It's a layered text set. And this is a really good example of one thing that you can do to help to connect to different learners. And so when you're reading or looking at a book in class, you can have alternative options for watching. So maybe you have a video that goes along with it. Maybe you have a podcast, an additional book that goes with it, a food to think about. So connecting it to students' identity through food. And of course, you can change these. These are, you could make a copy of this, and these are things that you can go in and change. But really, it's just taking a Google Doc and thinking about alternate ways that students can connect and feel like they understand what you're talking about by just giving them different mediums or medias. And let me just go out of that. So I put in here some tools for translation. I also put in here some tools for designing visuals so that you can explain things to your students through visuals. And then building knowledge, so making sure we connect to background knowledge, chunking concepts. And so here we have KWL charts. There's a course I created about cognitive learning strategies you can use with your students. Exemplars, so modeling, showing what things should look like and shouldn't. And then I do want to show you this text-based graphic organizer link, because this one is a really useful tool for our writing teachers, where if you click into it, you're able to basically have your students on their computer start to fill this out. And so they're going to decide what their prompt or their task is. So I can pick a side. And then they're going to fill out this chunked graphic organizer. And once they fill it out, it creates the essay for them from the organizer. And so once you teach them how to use, for example, these transitions, and let me go ahead and do, and there's a checklist too. So let's do my key opinions. And I think this one's the example, so I'll show you. So here, some people believe ice cream is the best. Using specific details and examples support your position. And now you can see a filled out example so that I don't have to do it. And once you end and you hit done, it basically just turns this into an essay for your students. And so if the task at hand is not to create a paragraph from a graphic organizer, then maybe filling out the graphic organizer and understanding the content is what your task is. This is a great tool. So it just depends on what you're looking to do with your students, and that's where it helps to think through your standards and the tasks first. And the last one that I want to show is UDL for action and expression. And so these are ways that students can use manipulatives. And so all of these are great examples of manipulatives, especially for math, that you can use to help your students. Ways to make sure that you have equitable calling strategies like Wheel of Names. Ways that students who can't use a mouse can click through the internet without using a mouse. And then we have here different types of strategies for scaffolding and checklisting and understanding our learners. So these are all in here. I would definitely highlight, since I only have a few moments, I'm going to show you Goblin tools. And I also want to show you our UDL choice board. So let me go back one second, and we'll go into these two tools, and then we'll finish up. So this is Magic School. Some of you may be familiar with Magic School. It has a lot of really good tools for creating content for students. And with this, of course, if you want to use any of these tools with students, it's always important to check in with your district. But if you're using this for students, it has a great UDL choice board creator. So you can put your grade level in, and then I'm going to say thesis, statement, development, or persuasive essays. You can add in files if you have more. You can also add in links to the Common Core standards or whatever you're doing. You can add in additional details like multiple modalities and 5 choices. And then I'm going to hit generate. And this is going to start to give me a choice board of all different ways that students can show their learning to hit a specific task or a specific standard. And so while it used to take a really long time to think through all of the different ways kids could represent themselves, now you have tools like this that can help you with scaffolding or choice boarding. So I wanted to show that. And the last thing I want to show before we move into just the final slide is Goblin Tools. Because it helps our students, it has something called a magic to do. And what it does is it helps our students to think through, and you can use it for your students to make them a checklist if you don't want to use it with students, to think through the task that they have. So write a persuasive thesis statement. So once you have this task, you can hit this plus sign, and then you can hit the breakdown item. And what it does is it gives you all, or for your students, all the different steps they need to think through to be able to write that thesis statement. And what's nice about this is you can continue to break down the item for students as much as they need. So we're looking at the main argument. Now we're going to break this down further. How do we identify this argument? And it gives you more and more steps. So this way you're helping your students without actually giving them how to do it. So I think that's a really good tool as well. So finishing up, I also have on this last slide here just some additional design considerations if you do have students with specific disabilities in your class. So we've talked a lot about presenting content in multiple ways. Some other things to think about are using really clear structures for your organization of documents and easy to understand language. And then depending on what other physical disabilities your students may have, thinking about contrast and alternative text and captions. And we have a whole nother session on that in the future. And that leaves us with 1 minute and the links to our upcoming accessibility sessions. Does anyone have any questions or anything that they're excited to try out? Absolutely. Goblin Tools. Yeah, it's a really good one. And there are a lot of other features on Goblin Tools. So it has all sorts of things up here to check out too. But the best one, I think, for accessibility is probably this one, the Magic To Do. Yeah, Magic School is a very good one that a lot of school districts are jumping into because it has so many tools, and a lot of them are for accessibility.
I really love Magic School. Unfortunately, my district doesn't have it, but I subscribe to it, and I use the IEP generator to help kind of prioritize and kind of give bullet points to be able to get tools to support students.
Absolutely. The IEP generator on that is really good. Support goals is really good as well. Just, of course, I always have to say it when you're using any of those kind of tools, make sure that you're not putting in specific information that's personal to the students. But as long as it's generic, they're really useful tools. And you can use that to piggyback off of your UDL choice boards. So you take some of those goals that you get for your students and you can include that in that additional information and build out a really tailored supported UDL choice board. All right, well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and